Right, we are now cooking on gas. So can I formally welcome Marc to talk to us this evening about shenanigans in Bournemouth? And I think I'll leave it to you, Marc, to take on now and describe what shenanigans really took place.
Yeah, no, thank you, Michael. And look, evening, everybody. It's great to be here. This is, as Michael says, very close to my heart. This was my first endeavour into the industry. And it seemed to have stuck with me ever since, because I haven't done anything else and I don't know really anything else but buses. So let me see if I can take you through. It's approximately about a 10 years, 1987 to 1997. Things that, as Michael says, shenanigans in Bournemouth. I've got some slides to take you through. I've got some photos and bits and bobs. There are credits at the end, and apologies if I've missed any credit out, but it's more to give context of what was going on at the time rather than using the photos for anything else. But let's see if we can get going. I'm going to see if the technology works and share my screen now. Right. Hopefully, you've got a slide deck on the front that says Shenanigans Around Bournemouth and the Omnibus Society. Yep. So, this is 37 years ago. I was 16. I'll tell you a little bit more about that in a minute, but it's going back 37 years. So please forgive me. Errors and omissions accepted, please. And if anybody wants to correct me, by all means do so, because I can't remember everything, unfortunately, despite doing some research on certain things. So we're going to go through the conurbation. We're going to cover various bits of Shamrock and Rambler, the Badger Vectis moments, Route Master and yellow buses in Bournemouth, and then we'll talk about different colour buses in Bournemouth that are still yellow. So where did it all start for me? Well, I was about 13. I was travelling around, used to get a day ticket on the Bournemouth Corporation Transport Network. There were still conductors on a couple of routes, and I even used to get an Explorer ticket. So there you see a timetable from Yellow Bus 1984. Some great people on there, and as we know, the industry is about great people. You've got Colin, Trevor, Bob, Dave, Tom and Joni on the front of that timetable, all great people. So I used to spend a day on the buses, and then sometimes I go further afield and get an Explorer ticket and do a day travelling to Bournemouth to Salisbury on an X3, and then go get a Badger Line day Rambler ticket and go all around Avon and part of Somerset and so on. So it started to get into my blood at that point, memorising road names and route descriptions. Yellow buses were one of the few operators that used to print the entire route description for every road on the timetable page. So that got into my head of remembering that. There you see the buses at the time, an X4 on its way to Bristol with Wilts and Dorset. I think that's probably leaving Salisbury bus station. So there's me at senior school, just started, I think, with a couple of mates. And I'll come back to that photo at the end. So, where should we start? Charlie's Cars. So, obviously owned by Shamrock and Rambler, we know that, but it wasn't privatised, Shamrock, until 1987. But in 1986, at the start of deregulation, and they actually started one day before deregulation, they introduced some minibus routes, competing with Bournemouth Transport, yes and no, probably trying to find a bit more of a niche market, I would say, by introducing Hail and Ride. And I lived, well, where my parents' house, and they're still there, I was 30 metres away from a junction where I think it was Route A and B, which was a circular that went past the end of the road. I used to catch that quite a lot, the novelty of it. There was 9 or 10 bread vans or Ford Transits at the time. Interestingly, they had fare stram ticket machines, which I'd never seen before at the time, and not many operators had them. I know Southampton City Bus did, but that was quite modern technology, having the first round ticket machines, because I think at that time yellow buses were either set right or just moving on to Wayfarer 2 at the time. But you know, this is a courageous operation. You know, got a lot of optimism to it. I think the MD at the time was James Freeman, and then they started expanding routes further by not only obviously on the Charlie's Cars network, but they also expanded into single decks, competing with yellow buses on what we call, when I was at Yellow Bus, we used to call it side roads, which is the buses that went through Winton and Moordown and Kinson, East Howe and West Howe. So single deckers on there, trading as S&R buses. Charlie's Cars was expanding with more minibuses, and as I say, initially transits, and then there were freight rover Sherpas and some strange looking Optare minibuses. And the two pictures you see there on the right, both of those are in Avenue Road in Bournemouth, which is in the town centre. Shamrock and Rambler were really going for it. So we now had the town tracker introduced, which was operating express service across the coast from Weymouth, Bournemouth and Southampton, competing with the railway, but also serving the airport. I think that was probably the big struggle for Shamrock and Rambler. It was high mileage and it struggled to get off, obviously because of the railway. But the Charlie's Cars operation did take off, and they were getting reasonable loads. Can't escape that fact. It was really good, and the hail and ride was something that never been introduced before in Bournemouth. They had their base at the Hampshire Centre, which is now Castle Point, a big shopping centre, and their base was a petrol station that had closed down, and they used the forecourt of that, and that was their operational base for nearly all their with their depot based sort of like half a mile away, which was behind the Hampshire Centre in a purpose-built depot that I think now is Adams Morey, a DAF dealer, engineering maintenance company. So really good investment, and I think at this time they're also operating National Express diagrams as well. The fleet grew to about 45 buses, particularly the minibuses. So expanding in different areas, not just with yellow buses, but also into the Wilts and Dorset area. But Charlie's Cars withdrew all services in December '88, noting that that's after they were privatised in July '87. If my memory serves me right, they were bought by Drawlane. And as I say, then Charlie's Cars then folded the operation in December '88. But as I mentioned earlier, they had an expanding network going very quickly. You can see here one of those long wheelbase freight rover Sherpas, which is just going westbound from Christchurch High Street. And then there's the transit on the opposite side of the road that would have been going to the Somerford estate, which is a densely populated area just to the east of Christchurch. So, as I say, really operating across the whole network with Poole, Bournemouth and Christchurch. And there you see a yellow buses Atlantean in the background, just competed Charlie's Cars. And you can see there's a good load on the bus. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, you've got to take your hat off to the operation. There was some good publicity. I remember getting the leaflet through the door, advertising it. So there was door drops. And you know, nowadays nobody knows a mobile phone number because it's all stored. Nobody knows a phone number rather because all our numbers are stored in our mobile phones. No mobile phones in those days, and it was all about having a golden number. And as you can see there at the bottom left-hand corner, Shamrock and Ramblers inquiry line 535353, which would have, as I say, would have been classed as a golden number. But simple timetables, easy to understand. Some of the routing a bit questionable. There was one area where they went into an estate and back out again the same way. So you've always got that challenge of I've been sat on the bus 10 minutes as a through passenger and I've gone absolutely nowhere. But it was a good operation, very good operation. And it's sad to see the demise of Charlie's cars. And I think you'll find that the buses, particularly when it closed down, went to Guildford, London and Country, because the colours were not far away, having plenty of green on the vehicles. And then the National Express operation was obviously started up by a new company, Dorset Travel Services, that was a joint venture between National Express and three former managers that used to run express services: John Price, Phil Duncan and Roger Cunningham, which was subsequently then acquired wholly by Bournemouth Transport in about 1992. So plenty of action from Charlie's cars. As I say, serious operation, made a really good go of it, even invested in things like radios on the buses as well to manage the network. And it was a smart operation, just a shame it ceased. And clearly that would have been a financial decision. So it's 1987. I've left school, and all my friends have got a job working in Waitrose or Boots or something. I haven't got a job, so I need to get a job because I'm going on to college like my friends, and I need a bit of cash. So Badgerline, which was privatised in September 86, Vectis October 86, and Wilts and Dorset was sold to its management buyout of Hugh Malone, Rod Luxton and Andrew Bryce in June 87, after I believe both Badgerline and Southern Vectis bid to the National Bus Company to buy it, but the NBC decided to sell it to the management buyout. Badgerline and Vectis weren't having any of this. If you can't buy them, compete with them, I think would be a summary of actions. And they set up a new operation called Badger Vectis. Well, to be fair, it was Badgerline South in Salisbury, and Badger Vectis was the operation, the larger operation in Bournemouth, Poole and Christchurch. So summer 1987, I like buses, got into it, saw a job saying full-time conductors and drivers wanted, and I had to apply to this address, Key Shelf Co 175 Limited in Hertfordshire. Well, I didn't care. I just thought, if you don't ask, you don't get. So I wrote off saying, fancy employing somebody as a part-time bus conductor. I can do Saturdays and Tuesday and Thursday afternoons for you. And yeah, I got a letter back, which surprised me, not knowing who the operator was at that point until the letter arrived. But what is 85 the Ridgeway? Well, I did a bit of research on this recently, and when you do a Google Earth, this is the house of 85 the Ridgeway, St Albans, Hertfordshire. I don't know the history. There must have been some connection, I'm sure, on who was connected to Badger at that place. Obviously, it could be a finance person that just registered the company there, Key Shelf Co 175. But so Badger Vectis was created. Their objective, in my view, was to find a niche market against Wilts and Dorset, because they were going to offer conductors, minibuses and hail and ride, which at the time Wilts and Dorset weren't doing at all. They managed to negotiate to use the Yellow Buses depot at Mallard Road in Bournemouth. They traded as Badgerline, and they had a non-compete agreement. I think, looking back, if that had been formalised, people may have been eating porridge if that was the case these days, for obvious reasons. But the agreement was, you can come into our depot, but you mustn't compete with any of our routes. Not unreasonable, I suppose, really. But there you see the Mallard Road depot in the picture at the bottom there. I didn't have to go far, because my school that I just left is just above, just on that photograph in the top section. So I only had a few hundred meters to go from where I used to go to school to actually signing on and doing my conducting duty for Badger Vectis. But the ironic thing was, I received the letter from Badgerline, which I then knew who it was, as you can see there on the screen, inviting me for an interview for a part-time conductor. And where do I go for the job? But none other than the second floor of the bus station, at Poole, which obviously we all know is where Wilts and Dorset's offices are, and main operation. So quite ironic, I ended up going for this interview at that location. Pleased to say I got the job. I was interviewed by the late George Farrow, who I believe was an operational manager from Southern Vectis at the time. As you can see, I only went for the interview on the 27th of August. I think I started on the 31st of August, and service started on the 6th of September. So I got kitted out with all my equipment, and that was my set right ticket machine, which I think is ex-Bournemouth Transport, just by looking at the BT number on there. The box was from Southern Vectis. They were serious about it. We had customer care courses at the Dorset Institute of Higher Education, which is now Bournemouth University. We've got set right ticket roll, exchange of duty forms to complete if we wanted to. And as you can see there, that was my first pay, not my first pay slip, one of my pay slips, where I was paid the handsome sum of £15 for a conductor shift that was under 9 hours, and £18.75 for a conductor shift that was over 9 hours. Now, the good thing was my friends were working in Waitrose at very reduced rates because they used to pay by age, whereas I was getting paid the same as if I was a full-time employee. So I felt quite smug with myself at that time, even though that payslip doesn't look all that great. We had uniform from Bath Depot where we had to go and collect it from. As I said, the ticket machines. And so at 16 years of age, I'm having great fun. On a Saturday, I'm doing a conductor shift, and a Tuesday afternoon and a Thursday afternoon. I did a conductor shift or 3/4 of a shift most weeks, and it was just great fun. People say, what was it like? It really was good fun, especially when you got a good driver with you. I mean, all the drivers were good, just that some were better than others. And it was great camaraderie, and I really enjoyed it. In terms of the actual operation, again, it was serious stuff. Services across the conurbation, services 1, 2, 7 and 8 were all crew operated. Service 3, 6 and 9 were minibus operated. There was a big launch in the first week of September, where I think it was Barbara Windsor came down with an open top bus from Bath. The usual marketing material there, Poole badges, and you can just about see I even have my own name badge. So again, they were serious about really making it a good operation, customer focused, trying to get people to use the bus instead of Wilts and Dorset.
Oh yes.
Fare card. They struggled to sell Rover tickets from my memory. I rarely saw them, even though a very good price indeed, but they really struggled to get through that market of season ticket holders, and there seemed to be an awful lot of loyalty to Wilts and Dorset in that regard. So that was quite difficult, and therefore it was very much trying to attract the people that pull up at the bus stop itself. The actual network of services, again, going back to how serious they were taking it, we had evenings and Sunday services. They weren't crew, or I don't think they were crew on evenings or Sundays, but a brand new operation startup. There's about 40 odd vehicles, and they're doing evenings and Sundays, which is remarkable, really, when you see how competition has occurred over the last 30 odd years in deregulation. There's not many operators that have started up by offering such a comprehensive level of service. But the interesting thing from this slide is you'll see Bournemouth town centre in the bottom in the centre, and then you'll see the words Blackwater. Well, where Badger Line were unable to compete with Bournemouth Transport, once the bus left Bournemouth, it couldn't go through the second most densely populated area within Bournemouth, Boscombe. It had to go through a 70-mile-an-hour dual carriageway and then take the back road to Christchurch. That was, you know, it was costing a lot of mileage with no opportunity to pick up passengers at all. 2 lots of labour on the bus, and that was a big weakness in the operation. You'll see here we had again, very similar to Charlie's cars, some good publicity. Does what it says on the tin. We've got a route map, we've got timetables, we've got a telephone number to call. This is, in my view, how things should be done. Times have moved on and there's other media channels as well, but actually getting what the product is all about in front of the customer makes all the difference.
Yep.
Excuse me. So all route leaflets, we always had route leaflets on the bus as well as a conductor. Always took a load of those when we signed on in the morning to make sure that we gave them out to all the customers. So this is some of the photos that I've managed to find. You'll see an inconsistent livery if you look carefully. The fronts of some of the buses are painted green. This is because that was the agreement with yellow buses, that the front should all be painted green, not to cause confusion with yellow bus vehicles. Now, clearly that condition wasn't taken all that seriously by Badgerline. As you can see, a mix of both green fronts and yellow fronted vehicles. Majority were Bristol REs, collection from Badgerline and Southern Vectis. The control point was at Poole railway station because we weren't allowed in the bus station at Poole, basically. Wilts and Dorset were taking that as their, if you like, their unique selling point. I don't blame them. I would have done the same. So there was no room at Poole bus station to get in, apparently. Therefore, Poole railway station was the next best thing. That was the control point. There would be the canteen facilities were normally a Bristol RE that you ate your sandwiches on, or if you wanted to go and get a hot cup of tea, there was a cafe in Falkland Square where they give you a small discount to have a cup of tea, and the toilets would have been in what was the Arndale Centre, now the Dolphin Centre. So quite primitive compared to what we need to provide for our drivers and our people these days. It was all about 80s tech. There was one person with a mobile phone, one of the 3 controllers. We had 3 controllers, just Roy Lovett, Jim Morrison and Trevor Shaw, and one big brick, which was the mobile phone that went to Poole railway station. Waybills were handwritten. I had to write down my set right numbers at every timing point and have my waybill in every day. There were roadside timetable displays. I produced those by basically saying to Keith Arlers, the MD, do you want me to produce some roadside timetable displays as we haven't got any? He said yes. So I had one of those very basic Amstrad word processors, an Alan Sugar Special of many years ago, and produced, I think if I produced 10 or 15 displays, I got something like a day's pay for it, something along those lines. And you'll see in the bottom right hand corner that one of the buses there, one of those Fleet Lines ex Greater Manchester, was even made into a model bus as well. The top right is an RE in Bournemouth Square, heading west with an incorrect destination on the front, because it should actually have Poole in capitals and Bournemouth lowercase, I think. And then the picture in the middle is 4 REs at Mallard Road Depot. The Fleet Line at the bottom's at Poole railway station, as is the RE. Now, interestingly, just on the RE, if you look behind the RE there, you can see a minibus, a Badgerline minibus with a very odd looking destination screen at the top. Those transit minibuses were cascaded to us from Western National, and they arrived quite late. I think they arrived probably about February 88. Well, to tell you the demise of Badger Vectis shortly, but they were quite interesting in terms of how different they were to the Iveco minibuses. We had Bristol LHSs from Vectis that were predominantly there as training buses, but quite regularly featured out on the road. I've conducted on one of those two LHSs. It's quite interesting conducting on an LHS. Felt like I was going up and down like a yo-yo, trying to hang on somewhere, but all good fun. I've conducted on the Swiftlink coach, which you can see at the top coming into Poole railway station. And there you see a better picture of the ex-Western National Ford Transit minibus. At that point, it had been cascaded onto Badger Line after Badger Vectis closed. And then the bottom right is in Wimborne Square with a, that would have been Service 9. I think that had been cascaded in quickly and then put out on the road quickly because of the no destination blind. I think there's just a number 9 by the windscreen wiper there. And obviously, I think it's a Wilts and Dorset 132 behind it, waiting to go into Poole. A few more photos here. So another RE in Bournemouth Square, heading east to Muddyford. Muddyford was an area where we was able to attract a lot of concessionary fare pass holders. Well, there weren't concessionary fare passes then. It was half fare for OAPs. With a pass or not a pass, but that was quite a lucrative area in Muddyford, and we seemed to attract, we got a lot of loyalty in the Muddyford area, and I think that was probably due to the conductors being a unique selling point. Top right is in Jervis Place in Bournemouth Square with a green front, and somebody's forgotten to put the Badger Line logo on the front above the grille. That's heading west towards Wimborne. Bottom right is again Poole railway station. Bottom centre is that Fleet line that's come from Greater Manchester, rammed into service ASAP before it could be painted. Basically, because bottom left is the Bristol VR that we had when we started, and I believe Bath were crying out for that those VRs to be brought back because they needed them. Bit of a shame because that was probably the best buses in the fleet. We had a couple of VRs, I think, and they used to go well, good to conduct on, and still personally one of my favourite buses. So this started in 87, September 87. What was the response? Well, Wilts and Dorset realised they needed to do something and put on enhanced frequencies, put on new routes. They obviously didn't have vehicles straight away, so they had to hire in from South Wales Transport. I remember there was SWT Leyland Nationals as well as Bristol VRs, as you can see there. They introduced the Skipper brand when the MCW Metro riders came and were delivered. But ultimately, the key success, I believe, or one of the key successes of why Wilts and Dorset was very successful in the demise of Badger Vectis was, as you can see in the bottom picture there, access to the bus station. And I know life's changed since then, and we can talk about all sorts of bus station access issues up and down the country. But that was one of the key elements of ensuring that Badger Vectis was able to pick up at the bus stops and take people into Poole. But the natural reaction was when you're catching the bus back, the shopping centre was integral to the bus station. You would walk to the bus stop in the bus station and catch a Wilts and Dorset bus home. Started September 87, March 88. A lot of staff have been saying about we need to go through Boscombe, we need to go through Boscombe. That's the key area. That's what's called Main Road in Yellow Bus's terminology. I don't know how, but permission was given for Badger Line to go along Main Road, so going through Boscombe. Badger Vectis also introduced a new route to Corfe-Mullen, which was a strong Dorset hold into Bournemouth. So again, marketing campaign. There was some trimming around the edges. There was a little bit less crew work now. A bit of an extension of a route to the coach station in Holderness Road, but good marketing. All registered at 42 days' notice, as you would, as you can imagine, back in those days. And you know, it was still a serious attempt to really hit hard at Wilts and Dorset. So 14th of March 88, those services started up, or the revised network of services started up. You can see here, very similar to Charlie's cars, there was some really good publicity, very clear to see, easy to understand. The weakness is it says Poole railway station on the timetable as opposed to Poole bus station. So 11 days after starting those new services on the 14th of March, those new services started. 25th of March, there's a notice we're going to stop operating. So I got a letter through, well, when I came in, I think, actually. You can see it there from Keith Arlers, the managing director, advising all staff that they've given notice to quit, both in Salisbury and in Bournemouth. Everything will stop on the 7th of May. It all came as quite a shock to everybody. Yeah, a very sad moment. It's interesting that I don't know why, but I still remember personal things that you remember. But I still remember when that happened, 25th of March 1988. The #1 single in the charts was Pet Shop Boys with Heart. I have no, reason why I should remember that, but the two just go hand in hand. It just sticks with you of what was happening at the time, and what was a major issue in my life, in that I'm about to be made redundant of a part-time bus conductor job that I loved, and I'm only 16. This is going to be good fun in the bus industry. So 25th of March, on the Friday, there was 0.9% lost mileage. On the Saturday, it was 27.5% lost mileage. On the Monday, it was 55% lost mileage. So people were just, I'm not hanging about, I'm going for a job elsewhere, I'm going to Wilts and Dorset. There was no situations like there's a retainer to stay with the business and so on. And so 4 days later, on that Tuesday, many missed shifts, people going for interviews. 29th of March, I walked into the depot, got another letter, as you can see there, basically saying we're going to terminate today. That is it. Yeah, a sad moment for me personally. It made local television news. I was saying to Michael earlier, I have got the videotape somewhere, I just can't find it, of BBC South Today interviewing Keith Arlers, the MD, and then also Andrew Bryce, the operations director at Wilts and Dorset. And if I do find it, I'll record it and put it on YouTube somewhere. I'm sure I know it's in my house, in my parents' house somewhere. But yeah, big news. The traffic commissioner subsequently, an inquiry, banned Badgerline, I think, and associated companies from ever operating in the Bournemouth, Poole and Christchurch area again. Therefore, I have a small confession to make, because when I was at first in about 2004, we started operating to Poole and then Bournemouth with the X53. Luckily, the TC's knocked on my door, so I assume that restriction has dissolved in some way, shape or form, which is rather fortunate. And obviously, when the business did close, the buses were distributed back. That's that fleet line that's now at Bath Depot. And as I showed you earlier on, that's one of those strange looking Ford Transits that started at Western National, Badger Vectis, and then into Badgerline itself. But like anything, it is all about the people. I'm still in contact with some people that I met at Badger Vectis. And the interesting thing is Keith Arlers was the MD. He was, he put his heart and soul into it. He moved house. He was one of the 4 original directors of Badgerline at the buyout, I believe. He moved house to Bournemouth, well, Wimborne, Ferndown way. And obviously it closed down. He was subsequently moved to be managing director of Western National, but he carried on living in the Bournemouth area and did that for a couple of years and then moved on to MD Badgerline in West Yorkshire. And the irony is that in 2006, 2011, I lived in Bournemouth and was managing director for what was the equivalent of Western National, first Devon and Cornwall, and also commuted down on a Monday and back on a Friday. So it's strange how history certainly repeats itself from time to time. So Badger Vectis has closed down. I'm thinking I need a job because I got quite used to having a 30 quid in my pocket each week. So I wrote off to Yellow Buses. I wrote off to Shamrock and Rambler. You can see there on the right, Shamrock and Rambler said they couldn't help me. The operations manager there was Mr. D.P. Matthews. And again, I was talking to Mike earlier, sharing the story that it wasn't until about 18 months ago when I was looking through these documents that I realised I know that signature, but who's D.P. Matthews? Then I realised it's actually Paul Matthews. I've known Paul Matthews, who's been managing director of London United, First West Yorkshire. I've known Paul for about 14 years, and I hadn't realised at the time it was the same Paul Matthews. So I did send Paul a photograph of this letter and asked him why he was so difficult in not giving me a job at that time, and I'm still waiting for an answer. So I also wrote to Yellow Buses, and as you can see, they said, could I come in and do a bit of programming because I'm into a bit of IT geekiness. So I managed to get myself a job at Yellow Buses just for the Easter holidays, writing a computer program to analyse fuel. So still back in the industry, but it was good for me. Just moving back slightly. So I mentioned that Charlie's Cars finished in around December '88. And at that time, Yellow Buses started to introduce minibuses. Obviously, this was new. They had a couple of minibuses, but they weren't for mainline work. They were they were used. I think there was one on the seafront service, a town centre service, and a route in a small rural part of Bournemouth in Holdenhurst Village and Throop. But Yellow Buses introduced the Yellow Flyers. I think the view was best we operate than someone else, as we've been had Charlie's Cars into session already. Sherpa minibuses, and then subsequently replaced by brand new Merc 811s. However, this didn't last very long. There was issues with rates of pay. There was a single deck rate at Bournemouth Transport that was rarely used, mainly for coaching, because majority of the fleet was double deck. But I don't think the finances stood up with a single deck rate for the minibus operation and the level of patronage. And I believe there was unable to get agreement on an actual minibus rate within Yellow Buses at the time. So they were short-lived, those buses, the Merc 811s. 19 of them went to Brighton and Hove, and one of them went to Buffalo, I think it is, an operator in Bedfordshire. And the top right pitch there is one of those freight rover Sherpas, a Yellow Flyer, and that again is at the Hampshire Centre, which was the original base for Charlie's Cars when they started up. Yellow Flyer stopped in 1989. And at the same time, while the Yellow Flyers were around, the single decks came into use. I think these were ex-Burnley and Pendle single decks, and Yellow Buses introduced these to compete against S&R buses, which I mentioned at the beginning of the presentation. So we've got single deck for single deck, minibus for minibus, and it was all about very much copycat tactics. And as I mentioned before, Charlie's Cars, S&R buses all ceased in December '88. So it's now 89, 90. I've just passed my test in that region on the bottom left. I even had a lesson off Yellow Buses on that vintage vehicle at the top right. Used to drive the VRs down at Western National. I used to do part-time work for Western National as a student because I was in Plymouth. Though they wouldn't give me a uniform. They said, yeah, I still have my badger line uniform from being a conductor. That will do. So I'm now starting to do a bit more. And I'm thinking, okay, you know, I need to go to, what do I do next? So I wrote to Ian Cunningham at Yellow Buses. I wrote to Keith Arlers, who had got me in the industry, and both told me you need to carry on studying. That's your best avenue if you can. This was particularly important because at this stage, graduate trainees weren't really fashionable. There was a little bit of it. and I was really desperate to get into the industry. It's what I liked doing. It's what I loved. So, as I say, I was driving when I was a student at university. I was driving at Western National. Each holiday I'd come home and work for yellow buses, doing various things, shadowing people, working in the inquiry office and so on. But while I was a driver, part-time driver at Western National, I used to get all the staff magazine. This is Badgerline Holding News from 1990, going through all what the group was about. There's, you can see the board structure and the operating area at the time. And I wasn't meant to, but I applied for shares in Badgerline as an employee. I think the regulation was you had to be full-time. But I applied for them and I thought they can only say no. Anyway, they issued me with a few shares. I didn't have many because I didn't have much money, but I was quite pleased that I managed to get a share in Badgerline, which obviously was close to my heart from starting at Badger Vectis. So skipping on a few more years, we're now into 1993, and Bournemouth sees itself, Yellow Buses sees itself facing some more competition again. So Charlie's Cars went 88. 5 years later, we've now got Route Master. I believe this was set up by some former Transport Museum staff. Bournemouth Transport or Yellow Buses was still owned by the council, and Route Master set up in 1993. Again, there's a common theme here of conductors trying to enter the market by having that extra person on the bus to offer that better customer service. We've got actual route masters themselves, backloaders. Some of them were ex-Bournemouth Corporation Transport buses. This was the thing that really stuck in the throat of everybody at Yellow Buses, that Yellow Buses was owned by Bournemouth Borough Council, but Bournemouth Borough Council rented out one of their maintenance depots for Route Master to house their vehicles, set themselves up and compete with their own operator, which to this day I still find, well, nothing surprises me in politics these days, I should say, really. But you know, conductors were a big thing, a part of this operation. There was involvement of Clydeside 2000 and a gentleman called George Watson, I believe, and the first route was 604, basically what I call side roads, which is Bournemouth through Winton, East Howe, West Howe to Kinston, lucrative area. And then the second route was to Fisherman's Walk via Boscombe, which is the main road services that I mentioned. There was also seafront services too. Now you see the Route Master on the top right there. Instead of having conductors, I'll save that story. I'll save that story. More to come on that, on conductors. So 42 days notice for traffic commissioner changes still at this point. Again, good publicity by Route Master, simple timetables, just what you would expect. The vehicles were very well presented. They were painted well. I know there was a few engineering issues, as you would expect with that age of vehicle, but you know, it was presented well. The staff at the beginning seemed very keen, very customer focused. And it did get a bit of traction. So Yellow Buses had to sit up and make a decision on what they were going to do. And at this point, the MD's Ted Reed, the late Ted Reed, and he basically sets up what he calls White Buses. The most innovative of brand name, I would have thought. Nevertheless, and this was going to compete with Route Master. It'll be a copycat route using existing buses of cascaded old Yellow Buses. For PVR for the first route W6, I said to Ted, I'll run it. I was IT manager at this point at Yellow Buses. It's my first job. I was only on a 12-month contract and I was 9 months in. And so I just said to Ted, I'll run it. And he said, yeah, okay then. But we were running it without conductors. We did have Wayfarer 3 ticket machines with mag card validators. And we procured those just for the white bus fleet, but we had actually ordered them for the whole yellow buses fleet. Sorry, we had them for the white bus fleet, but we had ordered them for the yellow bus fleet as well. But we had Almex coming to give us a presentation of their A90 ticket machine, I think it would have been, or Eurofare at the time. And so Ted said, you need to make sure that all 4 of the white buses are out of the depot because Almex are coming, and we can't let them know that we've got Wayfarer 3s already in operation because they think they're still bidding for the business. So that was a bit of an interesting story, making sure we can't bring a bus back yet until Almex have left the depot. But as I say, one manager, that was me. There was no uniforms, drivers, lower rates of pay, lower T's and C's, no sick pay. The benefit was no Sundays or lates to start with. And it started off with 4 fleet lines. Then it went to, I think we had 5 DMSs, as you can see top right there, of which ironically, some of them were ex-Wilts and Dorset DMSs that they had got rid of. So these buses kept coming back to Bournemouth. And really 90s tech, didn't get advanced as Badger Vectis and having the brick mobile phone, but I did have a pager, which used to go off if the controllers or inspectors in the town centre had an issue that they wanted me to deal with. This started May 93. We then started painting the fronts of the buses yellow because everybody didn't know who white buses were. Interesting to understand brand loyalty in that regard. And as you can see, we had Wayfarer 3 ticket machines and magnetic card validators with white bus mag cards. But we did a strong focus in marketing on a 12 for 10 ticket, and that sort of carnet ticket hadn't been introduced at yellow buses. I know Charlie's Cars did it, but yellow buses never followed suit in that regard, but it did go live when white buses started in May 93. So that was our target season ticket, basically to give flexibility. You'll see in the top right hand corner though, there's what I call a Poetum, which is a portable electronic ticket machine. Those are the ticket machines that were used by London Transport. And instead of putting conductors on the buses, I decided I wanted to capture the market before they had a choice. So I employed a pavement conductor for Bournemouth Square, and you can see the picture here. This is Bournemouth Square. I employed this guy called Alan Perry. He's no longer with us, unfortunately. Super guy, really customer focused. And he was there 9 till 6 every day. And I did discover at a later time that on one occasion, the Routemaster bus was on the stand, as you can see. The driver and the conductor from the Routemaster bus rather, had gone off for a cigarette or a cup of coffee and just left the bus open. Passengers had obviously boarded the bus because they know the conductor's going to come round. But my pavement conductor, Alan, got on the bus, issued them all tickets, got off the bus and carried on with his pavement conductor duties, only to see the driver and the conductor of the bus get on. And I hate to imagine the conversations that took place between the customers and the conductor when they said they've already paid. So that was, you know, great entrepreneurship by my pavement conductor. Few challenges on white buses in terms of getting W's on the blind, very traditional blind setup at yellow buses. So we had to put vinyl on the side, as you can see there, and then just show the number 6 or whatever route was appropriate. So we've now got the splash of yellow on the front, which is starting to get a little bit more loyalty, people understanding that we are yellow buses after all, even though they're painted white now, but yellow fronts. So all very challenging in terms of a commercial strategy on brand. The business or the routes kept on expanding as Routemaster did. So we had to hire in extra buses. So at the top is a VR on loan from Southern Vectis, and at the bottom from Thamesdown. The VR, I think we had 2 from Southern Vectis. They only lasted on the road for a couple of days, excuse me, because we received a legal letter from a lawyer for Routemaster claiming that we were passing off as route master, with the buses predominantly being green and cream. So we made the decision not to operate those much longer, and I think they returned back to the Isle of Wight accordingly. Big shame, because I like those VRs, I must be honest, as I said earlier. So August 94, Route Master has in essence ceased trading by now. We went out and bought some VRs for ourselves, which I was quite pleased about. You'll see top right there were 4 VRs from Yorkshire Traction. We nearly bought some Midland Fox minibuses and some Deckers. I went up in December 93 with our engineering director to look at some buses in Leicester Depot. We decided against it and instead went for these VRs from Yorkshire Traction. And as you can see there's that DMS, that ex-Wilts and Dorset, now fully painted in yellow. And again, we even get a model bus. The model bus manufacturers produces a model for it as well. So you know, there's at this point there's also strained relations with Wilts and Dorset a little bit, not from the white bus scenario, but from the Badger Vectis moment. And I remember at a certain period of this time, at Yellow Buses on normal mainline work, we had a double decker that was for B&Q Auto Centre, so it was painted nearly all over in red, and there was that preferential route allocation of that at Yellow Buses was for service 30 that went into Poole to try and blend in with the bus scenery over there, which was obviously predominantly red. So a little bit more on Yellow Buses. I introduced in 96 the first real route branding for Bournemouth Transport. There's the livery. I did that on my computer using Alder's PageMaker. I don't think I've fessed that up to Ray Stenning. Please don't show Ray this. I only get a hard time for it because he would be right. It is appalling, but it was the right thing to do at the time. We had the first generation of real time from Brytech, who produced the destination screens. Had that on 5 stops on service 17, route tickets, and then we introduced a bit more route branding with service 6, which also saw a frequency increase, and with the Westbourne Flyer, as you can see bottom right here. Another interesting fact is you see there a East Lancs bodied midi bus, Dennis Dart. There was, I think we had 22 of those, all originally delivered with a rear window. But we had a very good relationship, I particularly had with Wayfarer, as they're only down the road in Poole. And so we trialled what was their product called Message Maker, which was basically an LED coloured screen in the bus for passenger information. There was concerns raised with the police that you could see white dots from the screen, even though it was behind the driver's bulkhead. Complaints from drivers. And therefore, to continue with the trial, we actually filled in the rear window of all the buses that had Message Maker fitted to them. So that's the reason why you see those buses, well, not anymore, but I know there's some preserved. You see them with the rear glass filled in. Coming to a close now. So Christchurch Buses, it was Yellow Buses acquired this for a low-cost operation around 95. It had some legacy with Route Master and vintage Yellow Buses, based at Bournemouth Airport, using mainly ex-Yellow Bus vehicles. You see some fleet lines there. Operated school services, so Bournemouth University from Salisbury and Weymouth. Operated night bus services. We operated night bus services for a nightclub. There was one nightclub in Bournemouth called the Opera House, owned by a gentleman that's quite well known in Bournemouth called Richard Carr, who set up many a business and had gone bust. I knew he only had planning permission or licensing permission to keep his nightclub open until 3 in the morning, provided he provided night bus services. But he really struggled to pay. So every week I'd say there's no buses today unless I get them on a Thursday morning. Somebody would drive down to Mallard Road, leave an envelope with a cheque for the previous week's night buses, and it was on a different account each week. But it's always useful to know when it's a licensing obligation to make sure that your customers pay on time. In 2000, Christchurch Buses was absorbed into Yellow Buses, and there was continued a bit of strained relationships between Wilts and Yellow Buses, not as intense as the Badger Vectis moment. That was obviously the nucleus of intense relations rather than competition. But Wilts and Dorset's 105 encroached further in Christchurch against Yellow Buses' main road services. There was a big negotiations that myself and my boss had with Andrew Bryce over the bus stop allocation in the Triangle and Bournemouth Square in '95 when it was reconstructed. Yellow Buses went over Poole Bridge to Condor Ferry. I remember introducing a Yellow Buses X22, which was a fast bus from Christchurch to Bournemouth via Fairmile. That was a bit of a challenge because we could only allocate a bus that had a digital destination screen on it, because Bournemouth only went for double route number blinds rather than triple route number blinds. And then we also had a tender in Bransfield. So little bits of going out the traditional Yellow Bus area was happening quite a bit. And it also started the Bournemouth University contract with Christchurch Buses, and ultimately that went, I think it would probably be about early 2000s, that moved over to Wilts and Dorset and is run today by GSC, very well run indeed. So how it started, how it's going. You remember this photo from the start? Well, that's me in the middle. On my right, so as you're looking at the screen, your left, that is a guy I went to school with called Steve Eady. I took him on as a driver on White Buses, and he was a great driver for me. So I managed to get one school friend into the bus theme. And the chap on the other side of me, a guy called John Rimmel, he's my best friend. His dad was an inspector on Charlie's Cars, and then was senior engineering clerk at Yellow Buses, and I shared an office with him. And his mum was the payroll clerk at Yellow Buses. So I've managed to somehow keep friends or family associated with buses, even from a school age. So there we go. Look, I've talked for an hour. You can probably tell my voice is going, and I apologise if I've allowed people to nod off, because I do get my voice can drone on a bit. But thank you for the credits. Thank you for the photographs. Hopefully I've credited everybody there. Apologies if I haven't. It is not intentional, but I hope you found that useful.
Well, thank you very much, Mark. I think it's interesting coming back to something like this. I mean, 30 plus years later, there's sort of things that can be said that probably couldn't have been said at, say, not that long ago. The little asides that sort of make it more real about poaching conductors, your conductor poaching the customers of route master, etc. I think it's interesting to look now where Bournemouth is, and the history that's gone on with Yellow and Go South Coast, and even now, I mean, Transpora at least been trying a little bit of competition, but that's disappeared within Bournemouth. But I don't know if there's anyone on here that actually remembers the era down at Poole and Bournemouth where we had Badger Vectis and such like. Would like to share any memories, or if anyone's got any questions for Mark, more than happy to hear them. But I'll say,
and I'm happy to be corrected on anything that I may have said as well. By the way, Michael, more than happy.
Martin Curtis has raised a hand, so if Martin would like to unmute himself.
Thank you. Hello, Mark. Very good talk. Just one small detail. You mentioned the set right at the beginning, which was your first set right with the BT prefix. I think you'll find that came from Badger Line, and BT stood for Bristol Tramways, which became Bristol Omnibus in 1957. But we had hundreds of those at Bath bus station because I moved to Bath at the time all this was going on. So there was that connection. But I think it came from Bristol Tramways.
Oh, thank you for that. That satisfied my curiosity. I just put 2 and 2 with BT, and I've obviously got 6 instead of 4, you see. So that's great to know. But presumably you were short on cases and they came from Southern Vectis, was it?
That could well be. I'm not sure. I think they were still used as lunch boxes because they were Wayfarers, all the Badger Line ones by then.
Brilliant.
This comes up here as country bus, but I think it's Peter.
Hi, yes, I remember 86, 87 in Bournemouth and Poole very well and over the years, Mark, I had the pleasure of competing with you through Route Master and various other operations. So it was good to hear it from your perspective. But they were fun days. Enjoyed it very much.
Yeah, it was, you know, there's things that that we all did then that you wouldn't do now or can't do now. That is
very much so.
So you're still talking to Mark, are you, Peter, after all these years?
Mark will remember my old friend Henry Fryer, I suspect.
Yes, I do. Southern National, yeah. Henry Fryer, very much so.
I worked alongside Henry at Beer Regis, and sadly he died quite recently.
Yeah, great character, Henry was.
He was.
Character.
Alan Peters has got a hand up. Alan?
Yeah, nice to see you, Mark, after a number of years. I actually started the same week as you at Badger Vectis, but I only did 1 week because I was then traffic superintendent at Marble Street. And on the Saturday, every manager of Badger Line was down there. The depot, the regional director for Weston, regional director for Marble Street, traffic superintendent, me, and another one. And a couple of comments. The buses without a yellow front, the buses without a green front were on loan from Badger Line depots because they had a lot of trouble with the REs the first couple of weeks because Bournemouth weren't used to them. And a lot of them have been stood idle for a long time. And the hearing, Trevor Smallwood told us at the hearing, I think it was, for the disciplinary hearing, that, and it stuck with me forever, that the bus company can lose money for a long time, but the cash flow is so good, you don't know you're losing it. And ever since then, I always paid my bills immediately they came in, so I didn't have anything outstanding. And I think we at Marble Street actually got round the registration because we registered a Bournemouth Holiday Express service with a number of stops, and that wasn't challenged, although Chris Carmett, I think, is on here, might know more about that. And then other things were just ignored, I think.
I'm glad they were, because I only discovered the ban a little bit sometime after I'd registered in Bournemouth and Poole as well for first Hampshire and Dorset. So yeah, no, fascinating. And presumably you were down, Alan. Was that on the weekend of the launch with the open top bus and Barbara Windsor, or was it the start?
No, I started on the Monday.
Right.
I did 3 days of a minibus. I did all the services except the one. I did 3 days with a minibus where I did a Wimborne school bus of some sort. Then a 9. Then a couple of times up, is it Monkey Tump or whatever it is? A pool to, I can't remember. It's where there's something bus company used to run. I can't Monkey Tump and something Wise.
Headley Bottom.
Yes.
Rossmore bus.
Yeah, it's where Rossmore. They used to do some. I can't remember the number of that one. And then the afternoon I did the one from Christchurch out to Morton or Merton. Yeah. And then I did the rest of the week, Thursday, Friday, and Saturday crew with a nice conductor.
Yeah, no, there's some great characters on there, and yeah, I mean, I as I say, I'm still in contact with many of that. I still at Badger Vectis, and great memories and just wonderful times conducting, having great fun. You know, I was 16, so didn't have a lot on my plate in worries or anything like that. and you know, it got in my blood, and well, the rest is history, as they say.
Anyone else got any questions or comments for Mark about the presentation? I'm scouring my eyes for hands up.
I'll come back again and say there were two other operators that Mark didn't mention. There was
Please fill us in.
was Poole Bay and Hospital Express.
Yeah,
who both popped up during the period under discussion.
I remember Hospital Express. They had an ex-London Country RPs, didn't they?
You did, yes.
Yeah. And Poole Bay had Atlanteans from Plymouth or somewhere?
Plymouth.
Yeah.
And Badgerline REs that we left down there for them to use.
I thought they had a Badgerline RE. Yeah. Yeah. I confess I did have a slide with Poole Bay services on, but I thought I was up to about 35 slides, and I thought probably time to call it a day on the slide front at that point.
Any idea, Mark, why so many people thought Bournemouth was a great place to go and compete when you look at some of the other places around that didn't have quite the competition that Bournemouth seemed to attract? Yeah,
I mean, now, I mean, it was 3 councils, and it was 2-tier councils in those days. I mean, now it's Bournemouth, Poole and Christchurch BCP council that's a single unitary. And I think it's the 12th largest population for a local authority in England. So it's a big, dense population. One of the attractors, I think, was this was dying a bit before COVID, but you know, in the 80s and 90s, particularly in the 90s, there was huge amounts and strong flows of foreign students that used to come to Bournemouth in the summertime. Extra services were put on in the summertime, frequencies were enhanced, and capturing that the foreign students coming into the language schools and so on was really lucrative stuff. So I decided that that's one attractor. The other one, I think, is where, you know, Bournemouth and Poole and Christchurch take Charlie's cars for to one side for a minute, but you know, there wasn't hail and ride, there wasn't conductors, there wasn't you know, some of this innovation. And Wilts and Dorset and both yellow buses could well be viewed as very stale, traditional at the time from the outside looking in. And, you know, Badger, Vectis, Charlie's cars and so on, seen as probably in today's modern language as disruptors, if you think about it, because places like Exeter, Harry Blundered had been doing minibuses all over the place. Badgerline had introduced, I think Badgerline minibus was called Minilink. And so I think it kick-started some of the things that customers probably wanted. And that probably saw it as an attractor. And obviously, from a Badger Vectis point of view, you know, Badgerline and Vectis bid for Wilts and Dorset and didn't win their prize. So, you know, they thought, we'll run them off the road, I expect. And my, you know, might be people on here that know more, but my instinct tells me that it was going rather well for Badger Vectis until those enhanced frequencies came in, and particularly the MCW Metro riders from Wilts and Dorset. But I've read somewhere that they were struggling for cash at one point, Wilts and Dorset. Don't forget, they were only privatised as a managed buyout 3 months before Badger Vectis started. So it must have been fairly scary stuff if you were Andrew Bryce, Hugh Malone or Rod Luxton, when you bought a business and 3 months later you got huge competition from another big operator.
I mean, it's interesting to see, though, how here we are almost 40 years later, and they have actually become the dominant force, albeit now moved on through Go Ahead and everything else. It's
yeah.
Are there any other questions out there? I can't see any other raised hands.
Michael.
Yes, Stephen.
I can't find my hand to raise, I'm afraid. But what you have to remember is Wilts and Dorset had 7 different bids at the NBC stage. Badgerline and Vectis both were early purchases and were actually sort of almost bargain basement. And compared to, by the time Wilts and Dorset got sold, the price that the management had to pay for the company was definitely a lot higher than the assets for the assets that they acquired. So there was definitely sort of coming in to destabilize them was the idea, you know. But you were saying about tricks. Whilst we've been talking about Bournemouth, my knowledge of the Salisbury area included a manager in Salisbury that would spend his lunch hours by a Pelican Crossing eating his sandwiches. And he perfected the ability of actually pressing the button just as the Harnham left with the Bristol RE. And he had a brilliant timing. So you press the button, and that meant that Wilts and Dorset actually loaded in Blue Ball Row and in Brown Street. So the following Badgerline minibus couldn't get any loadings in town. And, you know, they then used to race around the estates. There was many stories like that during this era. Probably not really for repetition, but maybe over a swift half of lemonade would be a good idea.
I know there were stories I got from, because we had some drivers on loan from Southern Vectis, and there was one driver called Roland. I can't remember his surname, but he told me that he was in charge of making sure that Southern Vectis buses ran in front of any other bus. I just leave that thought there, I think.
Was Roland the one who in the Isle of Wight stood on the roof of a minibus to see a competitor coming along and then would jump down and get in and pull out in front of them? I think. Was he called Scoop or something like that?
I think you could be right, Alan.
Any other observations? I mean, it's interesting to remember, we hardly touched on it here, about the identical foray really into Salisbury, where they built up quite a reasonable network of services only to disappear. But Bill's got his hand up. Bill?
Yeah, thank you, Michael. I've got one observation and one question. The observation is, I guess, that not unlike many municipals at the time, one of the reasons for the competition in Bournemouth was probably that Bournemouth were perceived, probably rightly, as being relatively high cost, inflexible, heavy trade union involvement, etc., and so probably an easier target. But my question for Marc is, and this is a bit unfair really, but we won't tell Stagecoach your answer, Marc. If you could pick an era to be working in the bus industry from those early days of deregulation up to the present day, what 5 or 10 year period would you choose?
Have we lost the contact with Marc now?
He didn't like my question, obviously. He's hung up.
I just got something saying Marc Reddy's bandwidth is low.
Sorry, Bill. My bandwidth was competing with a 16-year-old on the Xbox, so I got as far as what era or something.
Yeah, so I won't go through my boring statements again. I'll get to my question. So if we promise not to tell Stagecoach, if you had to pick a 5 or 10 year period to be working in the bus industry, would it be those early days of deregulation, or would it be now, or would it be somewhere in between?
Well, I would say my immediate answer is 87 to 97, that 10-year bit, I have to say. Plus, I'd then add on, I would say probably about 2011 to 2016, something like that, I'd add as well. So quite different ends of the spectrum there. But yeah, I just look back on 87 tonight. It was just great fun. You know, going out and I'd love to have been a manager at that point as well. It was just great fun. I mean, you know, one of the letters I showed from Yellow Buses from 1988, I noticed that they have to type on the letterhead for the fax machine. So that was all revolutionary at the time, the fax. And yeah, so it was great. And I agree with you on the Yellow Buses being viewed as, you know, high cost, you know, challenging trade union relationships. Because when I used to go back each holiday, when I was at uni, I said, well, I'll go out and drive. There was a steward's inquiry about that. The union wouldn't allow it. So I did a week's work on the road at Yellow Buses that would have been about 91. But I had to have another driver, Bob Miles, and I said, I want to do lates. And so Bob sat on the seat while I drove for 5 shifts Monday to Friday, because at that point the union wouldn't allow me to drive a bus on my own.
Yeah, thank you, Mark.
So Yellow Buses did have crew operation. Yeah.
Indeed.
Any other comments back for Mark or about the era itself? I can see that.
I can think of an anecdote about white buses.
If it's clean.
Well, yeah, a clean one, yes. Back in my route master days, we used to tell our route master drivers to talk to the white bus drivers and tell them not to pick up passengers, but to leave them for route master, because if route master got the passengers, it would survive longer. And if we survive longer, then their white bus jobs would survive longer. Because if the competition ceased, they'd be laid off.
It's not a bad rationale.
So from your route master days, Pete, what was it made you start up in competition in Bournemouth?
Well, it was Keith Bainton and his colleagues from the Transport Museum, basically. They thought they had been done a disservice by Bournemouth Transport over the Transport Museum. So they started off by running a circular tour from Bournemouth Pier, and then basically had what originally seemed to be a good idea, conductor operation with route masters, but as many have found out since, like Mainline and Reading with Mike Russell, the second wage doesn't justify the increased number of passengers you can get. So it's despite the involvement of my friends at Clydeside 2000 at one stage, in the end it was unsustainable. It was worth a try, but in the end it didn't work.
Thank you. I can't see any other hands up now, or anyone else want to share anything. We've been going for an hour and 20 minutes. I think Mark does deserve to go and get another cup of tea and rest his voice. So, Mark, can I just thank you for sharing those memories? I think it's very interesting to actually be able to look back in hindsight now at what happened in those sort of periods. And it's been quite interesting also having people like Peter and Alan on board who can actually add a little bit from their perspective to the story. I mean, I think there's a lot of things happened in the industry about this sort of time, and almost with the bus archive hat on, you really want to try and get some of these memories recorded whilst we're all sitting here talking about them, because it was a very interesting, it was a very fun time in the industry. I was in London at the time and it was slightly different, but we certainly when we were privatised up there, we had a very good time for a few periods before it got tied down again. I mean, you can't do anything like you were doing now back then, and you can see that the fun's gone out of it a lot. Well, it feels like it has in the industry, but you just can't go and have it quite as enjoyable as it used to be. Well, that's my thoughts. So, Mark, thank you very much for your time. And as we're on Zoom, we can't really give you a round of applause other than raise your hands if we know where it is. thank you very much, all. Thank you for attending. And this is the last of our Zoom meetings we've got planned at the moment. If we have some more, they'll be in the bulletin, and you'll be more than welcome to join us from Canada or wherever. Thank you very much for your time.